In 1990, a political consultant named Newt Gingrich sent a memo to every single Republican candidate in the United States of America. It was called the Language Opportunity Leadership Document. Most people have never even heard of it. The memo basically contained two lists. The first list, words to use when describing your own party: share, dream, freedom, morale, family, protect. The second list, words to use when describing Democrats: sick, corrupt, lie, betray, waste, failure, destroy. 4 years later, a Democratic consultant named James Carville ran word testing for Bill Clinton's campaign. Different party, same methodology. Find the word that produces a specific emotional state before the brain has time to evaluate it. They were not opponents, they were colleagues who had just never met, working on opposite sides of the same project. The project here, however, was not governance, the project was the engineering of your emotional state. Folks, this is not a video or a story about those two men. They were only the ones who left a paper trail. This is a story about the machine that they both were quietly building and why you have been living inside it your whole entire life, even without learning to pronounce its name. 7 insights about the system both parties operate inside, about who built it, about why it needs you exactly the way you are right now. Insight 1: conflict is not a side effect, it is the entire revenue model. In 1968, a young television producer named Roger Ailes told Richard Nixon something that changed American media permanently. He said, "This is the way Nixon is going to win. Television is not a gimmick, it's the whole ballgame." Ailes understood something that most politicians were still decades away from understanding: the medium was not neutral. 28 years later, Ailes launched Fox News, not as a news organization, as an audience, a specific audience, with specific fears, specific enemies, and with specific heroes. An audience that would return every single night to have these fears confirmed. MSNBC also launched the same year. Different audience, specific fears, specific enemies, and specific heroes. Same business model. Both channels discovered the same thing simultaneously: that calm does not retain viewers, that resolution goes on to kill engagement, that the most profitable emotional state is not just satisfaction, it is perpetual threat. Now, here's what perpetual threat looks like as a business model. In the year 2000, Fox News averaged 1 million viewers in prime time. By 2020, on a slow news night, 3 million. What happened between 2000 and 2020, you may ask? The country just got more afraid, and the channel took advantage of this and just got more richer. Now, correlation does not prove causation, but the incentive does not need to prove anything. It just needs to fundamentally exist at the first place. The left needs the right to keep its audiences watching. The right needs the left to keep its audiences watching. Each side's existence is the other side's most valuable business asset. Conflict is not a side effect of the modern media system. Conflict is the fundamental revenue model, and you, my friend, are the product that is being sold to advertisers in between. Insight 2: the algorithm did not create extremism, it put it on a salary. February 6th, 2009. A small team at Facebook headquarters added a button to the platform. One button, and it had a thumbs up icon. It took about 8 months to build that specific button, and it restructured human political connection more than any election held in the same decade. Folks, before the like button, you posted a thought and it just sat there. After the like button, every thought you actually posted received an immediate numerical score. And the human brain, which is wired over 200,000 years to monitor its social standing, began optimizing. Not consciously, automatically. Posts that scored well got repeated. Posts that went on to score poorly got abandoned almost immediately. Within months, the platform had trained about 300 million people to produce content by the same principle Roger Ailes had actually discovered back in 1968, that calm does not score, outrage does. In 2021, a Facebook whistleblower leaked internal research the company had done on its own platform. And it had one key finding: 64% of all extremist group joins on Facebook were actually driven directly by Facebook's own recommendation algorithm. The platform was not a neutral space where people happened to become more extreme, right? It was an engine that sorted humans by their capacity for outrage and then recommended them to each other. YouTube optimized for watch time. Watch time increased with more extreme content. Twitter optimized for engagement. Engagement increased with more provocative content. TikTok optimized for emotional reaction. Emotional reaction went on to increase but with more tribal content. Three companies, three platform, one identical outcome. Because this wasn't a coincidence, it was the fundamental math. The algorithm did not radicalize people because it was malicious. It radicalized people because radicalization was the most profitable outcome the math could find. You were not manipulated by a villain, you were optimized by a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet did not care which wing you chose, and the only thing that actually mattered to it that you kept flying. Insight 3. A divided population is easier to govern than a unified one. Here is something that sounds wrong the first time you actually hear it. A deeply divided country is not a country on the edge of collapse. It is a country that is easier to control than at any point in its history. Folks, take a minute and think about it as arithmetic. If 45% of the country is convinced that the other 45% is the primary threat to their way of life, what percentage of their political energy is actually directed upwards, towards the institutions that set tax policy, towards the regulation decisions that shape their economic lives, towards the wealth concentration that happens while both sides were arguing about the other side? Not much, and in some scenarios, almost none. Between 1980 and 2020, the share of national income going to the top 1% of Americans doubled. During the same period, effective polarization, the intensity of negative feeling between Democrats and Republicans, also doubled. Now, I'm not saying that one caused the other. What I'm trying to say is it is worth asking who actually benefited from this exact same timing and this particular development. In every election cycle since 2000, political fundraising emails from both parties have been independently analyzed. There is one consistent finding that does not fade away. Emails that name a specific enemy raise more money than emails that actually describe a specific policy. The email is not a byproduct of the campaign, the enemy is the campaign. The most expensive political real estate in the United States of America is not Washington at this point. It is the space between you and the person on the other side. That space generates billions of dollars every single election cycle, and the people who actually profit from it have no financial incentive to close it or wind it up altogether. Insight 4. Your identity was chosen for you, then sold back as freedom. In 2017, researchers at Columbia University published a study. They tracked 2,000 Americans across 8 years. They wanted to know when people change their political identity, what changes first or which changes first, their beliefs or their sense of who they actually are. The answer was unambiguous. Identity changes first, beliefs follow. Think about what that means. You do not examine the evidence and form a belief and then find a community that shares it. You first find a community. You go on to adopt its identity, and then your brain begins selecting the evidence that actually confirm who you are now. This is not a character flaw. This is how human social cognition has worked since before language. The problem here, ladies and gentlemen, is not fundamental wiring. The problem is who learned to use it. Choose a side and you receive without asking a complete package, a set of approved heroes, a set of designated enemies, a set of permitted questions, and a set of questions you have been taught to find suspicious. The package feels like a worldview. It functions like a subscription, and cancelling it does not feel like changing your mind, it feels like losing a part of you. I want to be precise here. I'm not saying your beliefs are fake, and I'm also not saying that your concerns don't matter. Real people are actually helped and harmed by real policy differences that the government takes every single day, and that is fundamentally true. And I'm not trying to discard that particular fact. What I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen, is something fundamentally different. I am saying that the system which amplifies your concern, which tells you how to feel them, how to blame it, or who to blame, or which particular language to actually use, that system is also extracting something from you while it does these exact same things. And the one thing that is worth sitting with is it has never ever asked for your permission. Psychologists call it identity protective cognition. When information threatens not just what you think but who you are, the brain treats it like a physical attack. This is the most valuable psychological mechanism that is present in today's modern world politics, because a person defending their identity cannot simultaneously be questioning the system that actually gave it to them in the first place. Insight 5. Performance replaced governance. The audience chose this. In 1986, the political scientist Neil Postman published a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. His argument was simple, and his argument was this: the moment television became the primary medium of political communication, the most important skill in democratic politics stopped being the ability to govern, and it became the ability to perform. He was 40 years early, and he was exactly right and to the point. Let me explain. A senator who quietly passes effective legislation that improves 10 million lives actually generates almost no media coverage or very less media coverage. Compare that to something or some senator who actually says something provocative on a Tuesday morning and he's already trending by noon. This is not an accident of the information environment. This is the information environment operating exactly as it was designed. And politicians are not stupid. They read the same metrics that you actually do every single day. And here is the part I find the hardest to actually sit with. The audience asked for this, not in a meeting, not with a vote, but with every click, with every share, with every hour of watch time given to the senator who performed over the senator that actually governed. We built an attention economy and then we placed our governments inside it, and we somehow are surprised that our governments learn to perform. I should say something here. This video is competing for your attention right now. Everything I just described, the algorithms, the emotional engineering, the optimization for engagement, this video lives inside that exact same system that I'm actually describing. And I cannot stand outside it and point at it. None of us can. The most I can do is name it while I'm inside it and hope that naming it is worth something and changes something inside your mind. The politician who learned to perform is not the disease. The politician who learned to perform is the symptom of an electorate that began rewarding performance over competence. And an electorate that began rewarding performance is the symptom of a media system that made performance the only thing it knew how to show. That responsibility does not sit with one person, and that is the exact point that I'm trying to prove. Insight 6. The Overton window is not a debate, it is the parameter. Political scientists call it the Overton window, the range of ideas considered acceptable for mainstream debate. Inside the window, you are a serious person. Outside the window, you are a radical, a fringe voice, or somebody who's not worth the platform. This sounds like a neutral description of how democracies manage disagreement. It is not. In the year 1970 or 1970s, the United States government was conducting mass warrantless surveillance against its own citizens. The suggestion that this might be happening was outside the window. It was a conspiracy theory. In 2013, Edward Snowden proved that it was actually true. The window did not move because the truth changed. The window moved because a document made denial impossible, which means the window is not a measure of what is actually true, it is a measure of what the powerful can sustain denying on mainstream. Both parties debate fearlessly, right, inside the window. Tax rates, health structures, immigration enforcement, social policy. Real debates, real stakes, real differences. Now watch what actually sits outside the window. The structural relationship between the financial sector and the regulatory apparatus that actually goes on to govern it. The scale of surveillance infrastructure built after September 2001 and whether it should exist at its current scope. The role of the military budget in shaping foreign policy options before civilian debates actually began. Both parties fund all three. Neither party or one of the parties actually make them a primary debate. Not because they are unimportant, because they are outside the parameter that nobody actually fundamentally consciously observes and points out. I've explained this in a ton of videos, right? That the most effective cage is the one the prisoner believes is his room. Both parties actually give you real choices inside the cage. Neither party debates the cage. And the most radical question you can ask in modern politics today is not which side is right, it is who decided what the sides are allowed to be about. Stop! Before the last night and before the last insight, I actually want to ask you something that will feel absolutely uncomfortable. Not because I'm trying to unsettle you, but because I think it is the only honest question that is left for all of us to actually answer at this particular point. Folks, there is a research from the University of Virginia, a study of identical twins raised in different households, different religions, different social environments, twins with identical genetics, different political identities. Researchers actually found that before the age of 10, before any of them had formed a single coherent political opinion, the social environment had already begun shaping which direction their identity would actually go. Not the belief, but the direction. Which means the political identity you feel most deeply, the one that feels like it actually came from you, your values, your reasoning, your experience, was in part chosen for you before you were even old enough to actually choose for yourself. Now, again, I am not trying to say that, or I'm not trying to tell you that your identity is invalid, right? I'm not trying to discard the fact. What I'm again trying to say is for you to ask a fundamentally different question now that you're years ahead after you have actually chosen your identity. How much of your political anger is genuinely yours, and how much of it was carefully cultivated by a system that needed your anger to actually function? Now, I don't know the answer for you. I'm not sure if I know the answer for myself, but I think it is a question that a serious person has to sit with at some given point of time. And here is the trap built into everything I've just actually said and mentioned. Documentaries about how populations are manipulated have structural flaw. The viewer watching them feels exempted and they feel, oh, I understand the system, therefore I'm above it. That feeling is itself part of the system. Understanding manipulation is not actually the same thing as escaping manipulation. It is just a more sophisticated form of it. I include myself in this, and I also include this video in this particular mindset, right? Inside 7. Attention is the territory, you are the battlefield. For most of recorded history, power meant the control of land, then it meant control of capital, then it meant control of information. Something happened in the last 15 years that political theory has not been able to catch up with. Power shifted again, and almost nobody called it out aloud. Folks, the new territory is not a country, it is the 11 hours and 6 minutes of the average American adult spends consuming media every single day. 11 hours multiplied by roughly 330 million people. That is more territory than any empire in history ever held, and it changes hands without an election, without a war, without law, and without your knowledge or acknowledgement. The most powerful seat in American politics is not the Oval Office, it is the recommendation algorithm of the platform you opened before you go out of bed this particular morning. With no vote, no mandate, no accountability, no way to actually vote it out or take it out or eliminate it completely from your life. The President of the United States can be removed. The algorithm cannot be elected anyway, or it can never be done. And here is where it all becomes one thing. The media system that profits from conflict lives inside the algorithm that rewards outrage. The political parties that fundraise on enemies are amplified by the algorithm that rewards tribalism. The identities that were packaged and sold are actually reinforced by the algorithm that rewards confirmation. The right wing and the left wing do not control the system, they are actually optimized by it, along with you, along with me, along with everyone who has ever opened an app and actually felt something someday. You are not a voter. You are not a citizen. Not in the language of the attention economy, at least. In that language, you are actually a unit of engagement, right? And your anger is actually the commodity that they're looking for. Your attention is the territory that they're looking for, being fought over again and again. And you, my friend, and me, and everyone else who's included in this particular matrix were never even asked that if we wanted to be in the battlefield in the first place, and that is something that we all have to sit with. Conflict is the revenue model. The algorithm put extremism on salary. Division stabilizes power. Your identity was sold back to you as freedom. Performance replaced governance, and the audience actually chose it themselves. The window defines what you're allowed to debate. Attention is the new territory, and you are in the battlefield. So, what is the bird? The bird is not a secret group. The bird is also not a conspiracy. The bird is the set of interlocking incentives that make conflict more profitable than cooperation, that makes performance more rewarded than competence, that makes identity more commercially valuable than any policy that has gone out to benefit tens of millions of people. The bird is a system, and the system does not have to ask which party you're from or fundamentally have a party in mind in the first place. I want to end with a question instead of an answer, because I think giving you an answer would be doing exactly what I've spent 15 minutes describing. The question is this: if you genuinely wanted to stop being a unit of engagement, what would you have to give up? Not metaphorically, specifically. Which platform, which channel, which identity, which enemy? Because every system built by humans can be unmade by humans. That part is also fundamentally true. But it has never been done by people who weren't willing to name what they were holding on to very tightly and something that they are not ready to let go at all. The right wing and the left wing belong to the same bird, but you don't have to be a feather. The first step is the hardest one: see the bird.